Check it out.
Journalism, a program for the people, is a study dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast where we take you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State University. Our goal, to show you the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alumni on the path of journalism and success. Now, here's your host, me, Rami Alarian. Hello, listeners. I am so happy to be here today. As always, we have a very special guest. Thomas Neumann has been all across the country in sports newsrooms. Now he stands as the editor-in-chief at Athlon Sports, which covers sports journalism all across the country. Now, today, we're fortunate enough to follow Neumann and learn a thing or two about him. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great today, Rami. Thank you for having me.
Of course, thanks for being here. Now, you went to SDSU. You went through our beautiful journalism program. Can you tell me a thing or two about your experience at SDSU?
I can, and I had a little different path because I did come in as a transfer. And so I had a lot of credits in my back pocket. I had already taken a few journalism classes. I came in from the University of Texas at Austin, which at the time was one of the biggest campuses, one of the biggest student bodies in the country. And I got lost on that campus, to be honest with you. So I visited San Diego on vacation, decided I want to live here. Looked at the journalism school at San Diego State. I thought it was a nice fit. Turned out to be a great fit. I got the kind of personal attention there that, and I'm not trying to throw shade at the University of Texas, which is a tremendous journalism school, but it's just a huge school and it's easy to get lost. And there was a lot more one-on-one time and individual availability. And I just felt like it was a better fit for me coming to SDSU. And I got more hands-on experience. I got more face time with my instructors. And that was a difference maker for me.
That's why you chose SDSU. You were kind of looking at just how much hands-on experience you would get, and kind of like that teacher versus student ratio, which I would say is still speaks volumes about what the classrooms look like today. Is that things are still hands-on, things are still just as I would say intimate, close in terms of all that. As you went through your journey in the last couple of years of your journalism schooling at SDSU, what did things look like? Were you involved in anything here?
Sure. So I did get involved with the Daily Aztec my senior year. I wish I had gotten in earlier. I was admittedly somebody who kind of stumbled along and, I kind of got nudged into journalism. I had a professor at a previous school that said, "Hey, you're a good writer. Have you thought about this?" I started taking journalism classes. But it wasn't until I was a senior and I was like, oh, I had better really get some real world experience under my belt here. It's time to make some things happen. And so I finally knocked on the door at the Daily Aztec. That was a wonderful opportunity. Josh Suchon, who used to host this podcast, hired me, gave me my first toe in the world of sports journalism. And I learned so much by doing, so in addition to learning by doing in classes as well, the Daily Aztec was a phenomenal experience for me.
That's great to hear. I feel like that experience is all too well known. You get to your senior year, you start looking at things and you're like, let me pick things up a bit. Let me see what I can do. Let me see what doors I can get into. And Daily Aztec it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience for that. As you started moving along towards the end, what did things look like after SDSU? What did Thomas do?
Yeah. What did I do? So I was also doing some freelancing with local small newspapers in San Diego my senior year. I was like the Energizer Bunny my senior year, cramming in all the final credits, working at the Daily Aztec and working at community newspapers. Just again, trying to stuff my resume as quickly as possible because it took me until my senior year to finally commit to being a journalist. And so I kind of hit the accelerated track there. So I went on to work at smaller newspapers, weekly newspapers around San Diego. Some of them are still around, some of them are long bygone. Did that for about 2 years. That was really kind of the path you took at the time. The internet was a baby. We knew it was going to be a game changer. We knew it was going to be massive, but we didn't know it was going to cannibalize print journalism the way that it did. And so, when I graduated in the mid 90s, I was looking to be a newspaper writer, and I thought I would spend my entire career, 30, 40 years, whatever, in newspapers. That seems so quaint and adorable in the year 2026 because, there are still a lot of newspapers out there doing great work, and they're very important to local journalism, but they've obviously been marginalized in the past, 20 something years. But before I digress too much. I was in local newspapers for a couple of years, freelanced for the Union Tribune doing high school sports. And again, just trying to stuff that resume and just impress anybody. That was back in the days of sending out manual clips by hand to sports editors of newspapers, and I can't tell you how many I sent out, and you would get responses on 5% and interest on 1%, even if you called the newsroom and followed up. And so it took determination and diligence. And I recall like my big break in 1997 was getting hired by the Bakersfield Californian. That was my first big opportunity at a daily. I was going to cover the minor league baseball team there, but their college beat writer wound up getting a job at the Dallas Morning News. And so the Plum beat opened up and they threw me into it right away. And that was cool. I got to cover Cal State Bakersfield, which at the time was Division II, but it was a traveling beat, which even a lot of larger newspapers wouldn't necessarily travel with the local college. So it was great experience. Really built my clip file, got to be a reporter, really developed sources on a beat for the first time. Did that for about a year and a half, and I had a chance to come back to San Diego at the Union Tribune, which always kind of in the back of my mind was a dream and destination job. I still think very highly of the folks at the Union Tribune. It's not quite as big as it once was, but it was a juggernaut back in the day. And so, one of my mentors, Doug Williams, was kind enough to hire me there. I got hired as a prep clerk. I left a traveling beat writer job to come in as a prep clerk. That's how bad I wanted to work, badly, I should say, at the Union Tribune. And just got to work with some phenomenal people there, a lot of them SDSU grads, which again speaks to the quality of the journalism school there going back generations, really, from, I don't want to drop too many names because I'll leave people out, but Kirk Kenny, who covers the Aztecs for the UT now, obviously a distinguished SDSU grad. Nick Canepa, the longtime columnist, SDSU grad. Tom Krasovic, who's covered the Padres and Chargers, SDSU grad. So got to learn from some really great people there. Was there, I feel like I'm really stretching the story out. I was there for 8 years. I was fortunate to get a promotion from prep clerk to the sports desk after about a year and a half, and worked, in-house behind the scenes, putting the paper together basically 5 nights a week. Again, worked with just tremendous professionals there, learned so much in 8 years. And I thought I would spend my entire career there. Really didn't have any desire to go anywhere else. Um, that said, in 2006, I happened to see a job listing at ESPN for an editor for the page two section of ESPN.com, which is sadly bygone, but it was a humor and features site, section of the site that was pretty robust and it was pretty powerful at the time. A lot of people remember it. And I just took a flyer on that, threw my name in the hopper. Long story short, they expressed interest. They sent me a test. I said, as soon as I got the test, I said, I'm going to get this job because I said, I'm just going to spend as much time on this as I need to to knock their socks off. I did get an offer. It was um, bittersweet to leave the Union Tribune. I thought I would spend my entire career there. Um, but I took that job in late 2006, worked on the page two section for about 5 years. As an editor, did a lot of writing as well, got to interview some prominent people in sports. Gosh, everybody from Jim Brown, the Hall of Fame football player, to Mike Schmidt, the Hall of Fame baseball player, um, folks of that ilk, some of the top people in sports. So that was obviously, there were some cool perks that went along with that. I was in that role for 5 years, and then I slid over into the NFL group on ESPN.com, which is, you can imagine, a very aggressive and busy job. And I learned a lot in that role as well. I was a co-number two editor for their coverage for 3 years. Got to cover the Super Bowl each of those years. So, kind of a cool perk. But helped shape the digital NFL content for ESPN. Worked with some of the best people in the business. Again, I don't want to drop too many names because I will overlook folks. I mean, everybody I worked with was wonderful, but got to work with people like John Clayton, Jim Trotter, who I also worked previously with at the Union Tribune, just people at the very top of the business. And just learned as much about how to carry yourself with class from people like that as, the nuts and bolts of journalism. Um, let's see. Let me try and wrap this up because I feel like I'm just kind of going on and on here, Rami. In 2015, my wife got a job offer in Florida. My supervisors at ESPN were kind enough to carve out a new role for me in that I would be able to work from Florida as opposed to Connecticut, where I had been based for almost 10 years, writing in a writing role for the international group. And I had a lot of fun doing that. I kind of had my own lane. I got to cover the Super Bowl from an international perspective, ditto for the NBA All-Star game, got some select interviews. And that was a lot of fun for about a year and a half until cutbacks happened.
Mm.
And I was unfortunately part of it was probably the biggest wave of layoffs they had, which was in April 2017. I got laid off from ESPN. And that was a bummer, but it happens in this business. I didn't take it personally. It's a stomach punch, but if anything in the world of journalism, I tell people to keep their chin up, because it's if you haven't been laid off in this business, it's almost certainly going to happen at some point. I hate to say it, and it's I don't want to sound corny, but it's all about how you respond to it.
Yeah.
I went ahead and just sent out a flurry of resumes and really just started knocking on doors, got a lot of freelance work right away. Went to work for Cox Media Group, which runs like Cox Cable and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution out of Atlanta. I worked on their college football websites for almost a year in 16 and 17, covering SEC football. So a different world from like Aztec football. Um, and unfortunately, that project kind of, I could see it was financially running up against the rocks, unfortunately. So I jumped out of there and went to our local newspaper here. I caught on at the Sarasota Herald Tribune for about a year and a half, which was a real shift of gears. I went to the news side and I was working back at a newspaper, also on their website. So I still had my hands in the digital world, but um, it was a little bit of back to the future because I was back at a newspaper. We had hard newspaper deadlines. Um, Stories have to fit in the paper in a way that they don't online. So, and same with headlines. So I was back in that world. And it was kind of cool being involved in local journalism again because you do see the value of it. And the fact that those newspapers are often the only watchdogs for local politics in a lot of places. So, I root for local newspapers big time, even though I'm not working in that world anymore. I was at the Sarasota Herald Tribune for about a year and a half, and then caught on. Admittedly, I was itching to get back into sports. Um, long story short, sports is fun. You do have to work nights, weekends, and holidays, but it's more fun reacting and analyzing a football game than it is analyzing the stock market or analyzing a city council meeting, at least in my humble opinion.
You start making a bunch of journalists watching
I'm
the
better at
podcast
sports.
grow.
Yes, I'm better at sports. So I was able to get back into sports with USA Today Sports Media Group. This was 2019. Worked with them for about 3 years. I oversaw a group of, it was roughly 65 websites, NFL, college football, and NBA. If you've seen any of those websites that have Wire in the name, like Chargers Wire, Raiders Wire, that's that network. Helped oversee that for 3 years, and learned a lot about, it was a much different world. I came from the digital world back at ESPN where they were the elephant in the room, the big dog on the block, and they never had to worry about traffic. I'll be honest, we had the luxury of working on the kind of content we really enjoyed and we thought users would enjoy too, don't get me wrong, but we had the luxury of doing what we wanted. When I came to USA Today Sports Media Group, page views are much more at a premium. They're harder to come by. They are USA Today is still a big media brand, don't get me wrong, but not quite as big in the sports space as ESPN. So we had to pay close attention to page views, which is a different world than just enterprise journalism. And so I really learned how to, as best as possible, thread the needle between doing great journalism, but also ranking on Google so that you get that content in front of users and they actually read it, see your ads, keep you in business in the long run, and try to satisfy both of those goals. I was in that role with USA Today Sports Media Group for 3 years, and I moved over to the Arena Group in 2022, coming up on 4 years almost now. At the time, they operated Sports Illustrated, and I joined them to run the Breaking Trending digital group, digital news desk on Sports Illustrated. That was fun and a challenge. You're basically full of coffee for 8 hours in front of your keyboard, just pounding away, and just really very online and attuned to the news. So that lent me another perspective to again, to the threading that needle between quality and also page views, because I was somebody who had to either green light or put a stop sign in front of story pitches based on whether I thought that they could deliver page views. And so there's a little bit of forecasting crystal ball involved. um, Arena Group decided to let the license to Sports Illustrated go about a little over 2 years ago. I stayed with Arena Group and slid over into the editor-in-chief chair with Athlon Sports. And so it's a smaller brand name than ESPN or Sports Illustrated, but I'll be honest, selfishly, I get to be the editor-in-chief. I get to play decision-making roles. I get to put my fingerprints on things. Um, I rarely get told no by my superiors. Um, I've got great bosses that, I'm very much aligned with. And so I get I get to shape the content here in a way that I sometimes had the opportunity to at those bigger outlets, but I get to play a bigger role and have an impact on younger journalists that I work with too. And so that's really a cool position to be at this point in my career. And so I've been in that role for just about 2 years now. I want to say it was late April that I took that role 2 years ago. That's a
Yeah,
lot. Thank you for listening.
yeah, of course. I it was wonderful, the whole thing. And you started out as this bright-eyed journalist freshly coming out of SDSU, looking at the journalism landscape, maybe naively hoping to get into newspapers for life, but you were able to make pivot after pivot, is what I'm hearing. And I think each one of these experiences, it gives you way more knowledge, and it just
Yes.
gives you so much. It gives you so much. And I hear this out of journalists that, have just kind of gone with the ebb and flow of their careers, which is what so many of us have to do. And each one of those experiences is beautiful, and it's eye-opening, and each one is great. But I'm seeing this bright-eyed journalist pivot into helping bright-eyed journalists here as an editor-in-chief. I want to hear what that is like. You were talking about a little bit before, but expand on that. What does it feel like to kind of usher in a new generation of journalists being the decision maker?
Yeah, yeah. I'll be perfectly honest. It's a bumpy industry. The economics of this industry are rough. Um, Newspapers in particular, as I mentioned, they're still around, but every year they're trying to do more with less and more with less. And regardless of what company it is, it's almost like there are more cutbacks and they just tell the existing people do more with less. Um, and so I try to tell folks, if you love this business, if you love writing, editing goes hand in hand with writing, of course. If you love writing and or editing, there's a place for you in this business. But I really say, I hope you love it if you want to pursue the career, because um the business will be unfair at times. I skipped over a couple of bumps in the road, but I've been laid off 3 times in my career, never for performance. I wouldn't admit it, but it just because of economics. And even though they tell you this isn't about performance, it's a stomach punch. And you just have to keep that chin up, like you said. Once somebody tells me I do love it, this is what I want to do. Sometimes we work with folks who are young folks out of school. Some of these folks already have a different job and they're doing this on the side as a side career. I've seen people who did that succeed on the writing side and then leave regular careers, whether it be teaching or marketing or PR.
Yeah.
Um, but to your point, once people, if you do love this business, there's a place for you. And networking is super duper important. I don't
Mhm.
think that's any secret. But to me, I kind of feel an obligation to give back because just starting from the Daily Aztec, where folks who had a year or two more experience than me and kind of lent that helping hand and pulled me up a notch on the ladder to every stop I've taken on the career path, local newspapers, Bakersfield Californian, San Diego Union Tribune, ESPN, working with older people, more experienced journalists who, again, I just learned from and they helped shorten my learning curve and made me better. And so I feel an obligation to give back, and it feels good to give back, you know.
And that's a beautiful mentality, um, to want to give back to an industry that you're very compassionate about, despite any hardships that might come out of it. But you're at a great place right now. I definitely want to talk about Athlon Sports. And speaking of it, I chatted with a couple of sports journalism students because I'm not one myself. So I was like, I would want to learn about more of this. And they just found they already knew about Athlon, and they found everything fascinating. They were like, this is casting such a wide net. This is such a big variety. Um, it seems like such an expansive publication, and they're covering even the business side. They're covering, just about every major sports, every major team. And so I know editors have to they don't necessarily have to know everything, but they kind of have to know a lot.
Sure.
So how is it dealing with such an expansive network?
It's a fun challenge. So when I came into this role, admittedly, um, I was familiar with Athlon Sports from their magazines, their annual preseason publications, and you know, the big three, as we call them, are our college football preview, our pro football preview, and our fantasy football preview, all of which are under construction as we speak. We actually go to press with those very shortly. Believe it or not, this is April 23rd. I want to say we go to press with those starting within 2 weeks. Even though football season seems like it's a long way away, the magazine game, you have to think far in advance.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate to have great people on the print side under me. I don't meddle too much. I kind of run the budget. I will answer big picture directional questions, things like that. But I've got pros that I work with that I trust. Um, again, I was familiar with the magazine side when I came aboard. Um, the website was kind of a, a diamond in the rough when I came aboard. They had some talented staff, but they hadn't really put a lot of resources into it. So when Arena did step away from Sports Illustrated, they had Athlon Sports here in their portfolio, and it suddenly was the number one sports uh, brand in the portfolio. So they decided to invest in it. And we had a lot of success in 2024. We grew tremendously on the digital side. We were one of the fastest growing websites in the country. And not even just in the sports space, in the news space as well. It was very exciting. We were like the Tasmanian devil, just spinning constantly. So I learned a lot about the digital side over here in 2024. Um, in my role, I have to balance the two. I oversee the print side, but like I said, not more at a 30,000-foot level. And I'll weigh in on big picture decisions, but I don't micromanage the folks over there. We've got great people. I humbly think that our preseason annual magazines are the best in the business. And a lot of movers and shakers in the industry will say the same thing, especially our college football annual has long been um, kind of an industry Bible.
At the end of the
Um,
day, print journalism has stayed in your heart and in your career.
it has, it has. I keep coming back to it. It keeps coming back to me. It's interesting because we work with some very high caliber journalists um, in our magazines. Again, I hate to drop names, but someone like Mark Stein, the NBA Insider, contributes to our NBA magazine each year.
Mhm.
He in particular has pointed out how much he enjoys seeing the print product exist. Those old school journalists, there's just something obviously more permanent about it, but it is special. Print is special because for what it's worth, it still takes a certain amount of money and corporate effort or company effort to put out a newspaper or a magazine, whereas any writer can publish to the internet, right? And so there is something special about print.
Absolutely. And still I feel like it really resonates with younger generations as much as it's dwindling out of us. Um we I would hope that we still care a lot about print media, um hopefully in any form. Um
Well, I
but
would, and let me pop in real quick. Our
yeah,
magazines, I'll give a sales pitch for our magazines. These are
please.
annual magazines that they sit on my coffee table all season long. They've got
Mhm.
all the rosters, all the schedules, in addition to the big kid, big school, long read journalism. It's our very best work in the magazines. And we also publish that content, most of it online, but it's something that stays relevant all season long.
Mhm.
So it kind of scratches the newsy itch, but also the reference book itch for the user.
So usually what goes into the magazine? What are we looking at? Uh, I know you were saying it's a little bit different than the digital side, and these stories are a little bit more curated, planned out for sure. Um, and so what goes into that? What does that look like? And when I open up a an Athlon Sports magazine, what can I be delighted by?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me see. I'm looking at a document right now so I can give you the list of our titles, to be honest with you, because I just mentioned the three football titles, which are, again, our big three. But we have everything from, we put out about 10 titles a year. This year, several of these are already out, but we do a Major League Baseball preview, an NFL draft preview, a golf annual, which came out before the Masters a few weeks ago. We're going to have a World Cup preview, which obviously is a special edition because
Yeah.
that's every 4 years, and especially since it's in North America, that comes out next month. Then our usual NFL preview, college football preview, fantasy football primer, NHL preview, NBA preview, and then a wide-ranging year in review in the world of sports. So we touch a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would just say, I mean, we're extremely thorough. These are a combination of pleasant surprise, long reads, and the kind of reference material that you will look at as a fan throughout the season. So, I can't give the sales pitch strongly enough. I truly think we're the best in the business at
Mhm.
preseason annuals.
And as we kind of wrap things up, I always have to ask a couple main questions. Um, Number one, I bet everyone's a little bit more interested in Athlon sports. Um, and number two, are there any highlights throughout your career that we haven't touched up on just yet?
I don't know. I mean, I can always point out, big names I've had the opportunity to
Mhm.
interview. Again, Jim Brown, the football player, now deceased, really kind of stands out. I had a one-on-one with him just probably about 15 years ago. I really take pride in, especially when I was at ESPN, the standard was high. And a lot of these interviews I did then were what they called on the schedule of the car wash, meaning that these folks would come through and do a dozen interviews almost back to back. And I would get one slot on the car wash for page two. And so they would be doing radio, TV, and then page two. And I always endeavored to be offbeat, different, offbeat but smart, show them that I'd really done homework, ask them some questions that they are seldom or never asked. And even Jim Brown, arguably the greatest football player of all time, who's done hundreds, if not thousands, of interviews in his lifetime, stopped and told me, "You really did your homework. You asked some great questions." And I kind of puffed out my chest at that one. That kind of filled me up a little bit, and that felt good. Um, I've had the opportunity to cover Super Bowls as somebody who's watched the NFL since childhood. That was kind of an itch I wanted to scratch. Um, in the rearview mirror, it doesn't seem like as big a deal. You're kind of like, all right, 4 Super Bowls, it's a big deal. Don't get me wrong, but it's not as big of a deal as I thought. I think what I'm proudest of, to be honest with you, is just, I hope it doesn't sound corny, but surviving in this business. Like many people, I've taken some stomach punches and I haven't gotten discouraged. Um, and I've been fortunate enough to have some really good opportunities come across my doorstep in, front and center, my current role. Like I said, I've been at USA Today and ESPN and Sports Illustrated, but I'll be honest with you, I enjoy this role more because I make more of a difference. Yes, I'm a big fish in a small pond, but I can see the fruits of my labor much more easily and I make more of an impact. And that also connects to working with younger writers and hopefully giving them the same kind of good advice that I got, albeit in an ever-changing industry. But good writing doesn't change. The way you package it changes. I can still advise folks on good writing and get that satisfaction to hopefully shorten their learning curves the way that people help me. And again, it's satisfying.
We're getting into the profound portion of this podcast where we get motivational. Um, what is one piece of advice that you've overheard, or that someone has told you that has helped you along your journalism career?
Let me think.
So many to choose from.
I know you're putting me on the spot. So much of it is, oh, I'm kind of blanking for a specific piece of advice. So much of it is, um, yeah, I've gotten just by osmosis. Um, I don't know. I'll give you this. It's a little bit in the weeds. It's not so much career centric as content centric, but for anybody in the online publishing world, they can identify with this. You've got a piece of content, you're writing the headline, you're maybe struggling with the title, you're struggling with what title to put on it because you want the broadest audience possible, but you don't want to get over your skis and promise something that the article doesn't deliver. Um, I'm very clear on Athlon that we don't want to be a hot take factory. We want to be a smart take factory. And so a wise editor once told me, kind of if you're on the fence in that regard, err on the side of overselling the story as opposed to underselling. Again, I don't know that that's going to help anybody get their next job, but I've always gone with that. And it doesn't mean to write some wild clickbaity headline because, there's a short shelf life for that kind of content. You will burn through your audience very quickly. But it does mean be aggressive, be creative, stretch your legs, try to think outside the box. Don't just put a vanilla headline on there because it's really hard to distinguish your work among all the other sports media outlets out there. And there are a bunch of them. So I guess, again, it's kind of in the weeds, but err on the side of overselling rather than underselling your content.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to brag on your content a little bit. Again, if you do love this business, stay determined. Stay determined, and there's no shortcut to networking. There really isn't. And it's, it's not so much that I've just seen so much in the business that people often hire people they are comfortable with working with. And so the more people that you can put together within your network before you're looking for a job and get on their lists before those openings pop up, then you're already on the radar when they are actually looking for personnel. So yeah, I would say keep your chin up, stay determined, and if you love journalism, stick with it.
Of course, thank you. I just appreciate you being on the podcast today. I'm excited to get to chat with you, and it's absolutely wonderful to learn from someone as experienced as you, who's been around the country and in the sports journalism sphere. And I'm just excited to have you today. Thank you.
I'm flattered. I don't think that I've done anything extraordinary in this career. I'm flattered that you want to speak to me. I'm so proud of being an SDSU alum. The school set me up for success in this career. Before we jump, let me just say real quick, again, I've worked in a lot of mentoring roles. I've worked with young writers who have come out of some of the biggest and best names in journalism schools. Let me tell you, looking back, I was just as prepared for this business as the folks coming out of, again, not to throw shade, so I'm not going to name any other schools, but the biggest and best journalism schools in the country. And it's because of the individualized attention that I got and, just terrific instruction across the board. And then again, my experience at the Daily Aztec just really doubled down on that.
Yeah.
Even though I kind of procrastinated until my senior year, I was able to cram a lot in, and San Diego State really equipped me well for this industry. I'm truly proud to be an Aztec for life.
I'm glad to have you today, and I'm glad to be in that same exact group with you soon. Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
again for dropping some words of wisdom, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
My pleasure. You're most welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Where Ya At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms in person or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.